Oh boy. This is one of the grimmest stories that we're going to be covering today. Um, like, there's no way that I can think of to, like, twist this into something that can be funny or jokey or positive or something that's, like, worth making light of. It's just a fully fucking serious topic. Like, a real shit fucking serious topic. Because trans people and their rights are, I don't think they've been in such jeopardy in any of the time that I've been involved or tapped into politics. And this isn't even America we're talking about. Things are bad here in America for trans people. We just did a story about a trans woman getting arrested at, I think it was a courthouse or a Capitol building in Florida, for using the restroom, the women's restroom, as in protest. Literally arrested for it. So things are not great here in America, but the UK just made the bewilderingly unnecessary, even if it was, like, not driven by an incorrect partisan hate of trans people, it would be unnecessary and a waste of time of the British Supreme Court. But nonetheless, the British Supreme Court decided that, legally speaking, in the UK, trans women are not women. Legally, the law says trans women are not valid. Only trans women, because remember, this was never, like, a genuine, well-intentioned thing by any means. It was always ideologically driven, and that's why it's specifically targeted at trans women. You'll notice that despite the, among us, known existence of trans men, the right does not go after them. The right does not care to pursue trans men as a target outside of very niche circumstances, because it's very hard for them to twist a narrative about how trans men are women, but also dangerous, right? Like, it just doesn't work as well. The idea of men, quote-unquote, pretending to be women and acting as predators in that, like, wolf in sheep's clothing kind of way is a very effective fear tactic, and the right has no reason to fix what isn't broke. So their entire focus is exclusively on trans women, even though they claim to have an all-encompassing disapproval of transness as a concept. And yet they only focus on, legislate around, or talk about the side of trans people, not even the side, one of the parts of the trans demographic, the part that they consider, and that tends to be the easiest to get people around hating or being, like, made uncomfortable by, right? And in the UK, it's legally impossible for a man to be raped, so this is really fucking bad. Yeah, like, the UK is genuinely fucked when it comes to their laws. They're turf island for a reason. A lot of their policy, like, I don't know why they can have such, like, a right-wing government in many ways, because they do have a pretty right-wing, like, government. They have a lot, like, Boris Johnson is pretty fucking shitty. I don't think he's in right now. There are different guys in, but regardless, like, they elected him. You know, they voted for Brexit. Like, the UK is fucked. Their politics are arguably just as incomprehensibly stupid as Americans. Maybe not as much, but on certain issues, it's just as incomprehensible, right? Like, the majority of British people definitely support gay rights, and yet they have been convinced that trans women specifically are a threat to, like, lesbians, and on those grounds, you've even got progressives vying for restricting the rights and acceptance of trans people. So, yeah. This is really just disgusting and evil, and it's entirely an L for the progressive side of, and frankly, the good side of history, right? So there's really not much else I can say about it other than, this fucking sucks. But I do have a video here by Good Morning Britain, some British news. I've never watched much British news, so it's going to be interesting to see what you across the pond are watching. We got some British news here talking about how the Supreme Court's decision will affect trans women. Now, here's the thing about this. I would be shocked genuinely shocked if this leads to any actual action on the part of the government to restrict the ability to be publicly trans, to exist as trans. Like, you might be barred from certain things, but I do not think Britain is going to go as far as America might, in which we are seeing, like, trans people get rounded up and, like, sent off to cells, right? I don't see that happening in the UK, thankfully, but this is still a really bad sign. I think this really demonstrates the fact that a lot of people really aren't pro-trans. Like, the left is not as accomplished in getting people on board with trans rights or even understanding what a trans person is as we thought. I think for a lot of the rhetoric of the left, we have to go back to square zero and fundamentally be explaining gender, the difference of gender and sex, all these things that we've probably talked about a million times that feel like old tack conversations. We're going to have to repeat them a billion bajillion more times before it gets through to enough people that popular support for trans people is common. Because right now it is not as common as we would really like it to be.
Gender rights campaigners and advocates have urged people not to panic after years of debate about the legal definition of a woman concluded yesterday with a landmark Supreme Court.
Oh my God, they did there's something about these people that they get so excited when they have the opportunity to, like, hurt minorities. It literally makes them jump like a cartoon character. Elon did it, and these people are doing it. Like, they literally jump in the air like a cartoon character with excitement at the opportunity to hurt minorities. It's like, how corrupt inside can you be? The funniest thing is going to be the fact that, like, culture really swung into this, like, rainbow capitalism. Yeah, we're totally pro-trans. You can't be transphobic. And the second that, like, the economy globally got kind of rough because of COVID, and people started getting mad about immigrants, as they always do when the economy gets bad, everyone started shifting right-wing. Everyone started watching, like, pundits that complain about wokeness and shit. And now all these companies and all these institutions and all these governments and politicians that were, like, 3 years ago virtue signaling their support for trans people are now all frontlining the effort to shut down trans rights. And once this backfires, because trans people aren't going anywhere, it's just going to be the same as, like, going after gay people in the past. Culturally, all these institutions are going to have to go back to being pro-trans due to that being the cultural standard. So we're going to see them go from being publicly pro-trans to walking it back to support this, like, anti-woke Trump era they think they're in to try to make money, and then flipping back to pro-trans when the mainstream bounces back from in reaction to Trump's presidency. We are going to watch that happen over the next 5 to 6 years, and it is going to be infuriating. You're going to see Disney go from, we love trans people, trans representation, we love gay people, yada yada, to them now writing trans people out of their movies and putting Christian characters into their shit, making movies about Christian characters and whatnot to appeal to the Christian right in America. And then they're going to flip back to being woke again, rainbow capitalism, and it's going to be in less than a decade. There's something so weird about that, you know what I mean? Like, a company going from rainbow pride flag every Pride Month for virtue signaling to refusing to do it because that's not as popular for a little bit because of, like, right-wing populism, and then to switch right back to doing it once things bounce back from that era. It's like, I guarantee you we're going to see that shit. No, Disney is doing it, Rizcore. Disney has been actively cucking out to the right. Like, they consider Trump's win their loss. Like, they were fighting against Ron DeSantis. They were resisting Florida's bullshit. And they probably still will because they don't want their park to lose money. But as a company, they are actually falling for the go woke, go broke thing. And they're like behind the scenes, there have been journalists, like real journalist reports showing that like Disney is actively, like, scrambling to start coding their content to be more non-progressive, non-overtly progressive, so it doesn't scare away conservatives. They see Trump's win as like a clear sign that the winds are blowing right. Britain have this like a National Health Service, NHS, I think it's called, and they operate hospitals and clinics. And so if you go to a hospital, there's a good chance it's a government-run facility, and thus you as a citizen going to said hospital are subject to like government premises laws. Yeah, they do. Any Britbongers in chat want to confirm that? Like, the NHS owns the hospitals and clinics there, basically, right? Like, it's government property, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not a British person. I have no fucking clue. I know some. They've talked about it. I picked some things up. So, I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
Brought on this, like, reasonable turf. Okay. Neat. I do at least appreciate that she's like, as much as she may be full of shit and trying to come off as a reasonable, like, centrist, I will say she is calling out, like, the kind of shit you would want her to call out if she was being honest. Like, I don't like seeing people popping champagne bottles and celebrating as, like, trans people are, like, scared for their lives. That's not a look I like. Like, that seems like a legit, like, denunciation, you know? She's like the Sean head of TERFs then? Yeah. Remember, there's a lot of well-meaning people out there that fall into these groups and these ideologies and mindsets. We have to keep... I think something that we're going to have to accept in the coming years is that transphobia is so far from being exclusive to Nazis and far-right individuals. I'd actually argue that as much as, especially if you're trans, you don't want to admit it because that's a scary thought, I think transphobia, or what we would all agree are transphobic thought processes or beliefs, are probably the default belief of the average person you see, right? And it's not because they actively, like, despise trans people or hate them. I think it's that transness is unique to a lot of other minority demographics, like being a part of any other minority group. When you're gay, you're just gay. It's who you are. It's who you love. It's how you were born. There's not really much conversation else to be had around it. If you're a reasonable person, the correct answer, like, you kind of just have to be an asshole to think it's your business. I think most people, it's fairly easy to convince them, hey, gay people, doesn't have to be something that you like seeing happen. You don't have to like seeing two dudes kiss, all right? I don't like seeing two dudes kiss, but why the fuck should it really matter that they're in a relationship? Why should it bother you? Why should it be something that you feel like you need to call out or be openly against or make it a point to go against? Like, it's very easy to get a reasonable person to see from that perspective. And you don't need to know much. Like, you don't need to explain gayness or the experience of being gay to explain to someone why it's cringe to be homophobic, right? But when it comes to trans rights, I have to give, like, a whole sermon on the difference between sex and gender. I have to then, like, qualify that point because that alone is a controversial statement that sex and gender aren't the same thing. I have to qualify that by sourcing it from, like, probably, like, 4, 5, or 6 or more sources that are known, reputable medical and academic institutions before anyone will take you seriously on a claim that brazen in most people's minds that gender and sex are not the same thing. And then you have to explain that because gender and sex are not the same thing, gender is not constrained to the same physical and biological mechanisms as sex. And because of that, gender is not constrained to male or female or woman or man, should I say. That means that someone can basically decide to make up a new gender, and if enough people in our society over the course of however long decide to accept it as real, at what point is it not real? Like, at what point can you even say it's not real when everyone else agrees that it is? It's just a socially constructed idea that's meant to align with what we observe in biological sex, and it's meant to also provide a level of utility in our ability to use those gender markers, or not gender markers, those gender roles as a way of sort of dulling out duties in society. We hunter-gatherer, evolutionary type stuff, right? You have to give like a whole explanation of that. They're probably going to be like, no fucking way. Are there people legitimately identifying as something not man or woman? And then you got to explain that, and you got to, like, once again, qualify it. Like, there are so many levels of, like, blowing people's minds where they're going to be like, no fucking way. They're going to not believe you, and you're going to have to, like, prove a point just to be able to move on to the next point, and then they're not going to believe you. You have to blow their mind and prove that point to them again, or another point to them, and eventually you can get to. And so understanding all of that, trans people are just people who identify as a gender different from the one they were assigned at birth. Sometimes they will change features in their biological sex to align more commonly with what we witness and see in people of the gender they identify with. But it mostly centers around that. You have to talk about gender dysphoria. It's such a deep conversation. And I think most people, if educated on it, would come out of it with the right conclusions. But the education is a lot, dude. Like, it's a lot. Like, I have a hard time, even with how much I know, concisely explaining all of it, or even knowing where to begin. You know, like, where to even start? I guess the best place to start is the difference between sex and gender. That's usually where I go to. But, like, it's a lot. It's not as simple as like, hey, people born with a different skin color than you didn't do anything to hurt you. You shouldn't hate them. Gay people, they just love who they love. Why do you care what two consensual adults do in their own bedroom? Don't worry about it. But trans people, it's more complicated. You have to make them support trans people, which means they have to understand trans people, which means they have to understand gender and sex and biology and sociology. And then on top of that, you have to make them understand the struggles trans people face so they understand why trans people are always talking about being oppressed, because otherwise they're just going to assume trans people, sure, they exist, but man, they do whine a lot, right? So you have to explain the issues that trans people then face only after you've gotten them on board with trans people being a group that deserves rights. Like, there's layers to it. It's like an onion. You have to start with the outside and just slowly peel your way to the core. What's wrong with wearing clothes you don't think they should wear? Alice Henshot, it's not that simple. Because, like, as a trans person, you don't really just want to be able to exist. Like, listen. Come on. Trans people don't just want to be able to exist, right? Because that's a low bar. Trans people want society to educate itself and learn and drop its ignorance at a wide enough scale that trans people are broadly accepted. It's like trans people don't just want to exist. Trans people want to be able to be part of culture, to be able to be part of the media, to do what anyone else can do. Even, like, there are a lot of minority groups right now that are plenty oppressed, but can do a lot of things trans people can't, with much less scrutiny. Trans people deal with a level of scrutiny right now that bars them from a lot of areas of life that we all take for granted. And I think that's probably where I think we should be more honest about that. Like, trans people are not just trying to fight for the right to exist. They're trying to fight for the right to exist like everyone else gets to. Because right now, their existence is being framed as some sort of, like, political statement, or in the worst case scenario, an actively malicious plan or choice made. And that is very, very dangerous. That is very, very dangerous.
And obviously, you're right to say there are now a whole number of unintended or intended consequences that need to be sorted out. So this isn't the end of the issue, because yes, it has reinforced women's position, but it has changed.
I highly agree with what you just said, Kaname the Ulfer. The education on transness doesn't just need to be taught, it needs to be repeated over and over again, as to not do so allows for bigotry to start in with lies. They refuse to stop lying. You're completely right. The left needs to do this on every point. Constant repetition. Okay? If you pick your 5 favorite talking points that you know are true, that you know you can substantiate, and just find a place to post once a day, you'll be doing your job in the fight. The right is so good at making a thing they know they can twist to make them look good be everywhere. If there is a single frame where like a feminist made a funny face in a debate, that image isn't going anywhere for the next 3 fucking decades, bro. Anytime someone dares to make an argument pro-feminism, that image is going to pop up in the replies, because the right, I feel like every conservative on the internet has like a 5 terabyte folder on their hard drive filled with nothing but like images of random like progressives and feminists that have had freakouts, and videos of like minorities doing crime, and like they thrive on anecdote. They thrive on generated talking points that they repeat. And the right so frequently repeats their talking points that it spreads beyond even those who hear said talking points. And that's how we got here with a lot of issues.
Trans women's positions, women in hospitals.
Now, here's the really funny thing. How is this law going to account for intersex people? That's a whole other area of that's like a whole other area of conservative, or not even conservative, but like ignorance on this issue. Not only do you have to get people aware of the fact that sex and gender aren't the same thing, but that even among biological sex, it's more complicated than just like man and woman. What's intersex people? So I'm glad you asked, BV Levine. So intersex, actually, let me see. There's actually a really good chart that kind of shows this. Intersex chart. It's a chromosome thing that's super fucking complicated, so it's actually better to show the Scientific American thingy. So yeah, this is from the Scientific American. Obviously, there's like a whole thing about the gender spectrum, but this is more about, okay, this is a very complicated graph, but allow me to try to explain it, okay? Factors that determine sex include chromosomes, genes, hormones, internal and external sex organs, and secondary sex characteristics such as breasts and facial hair. Here's the thing about that, though. There are different points in which these factors come about. And sometimes those factors get fucked around with by a variety of different issues. So for instance, conception. When it comes to chromosomes, there are cases, though quite rare, it does happen, where instead of just having XX or XY chromosomes, you might have XXYY or XYY. There's a different chart that I also would like to find, if someone else could link it, that shows like all of the currently observed different variations of chromosomes that differ from XY and XX that we've observed in people. But obviously, if there is some sort of weird thing going on with your chromosomes that's off the norm, that's going to have effects on your genes and everything down the line, right? The earlier on something unusual happens in this axis of the chart, the more likely it is that you have much wilder symptoms or outcomes caused later on, right? And so an intersex person could have a complication occur at any of these points and count as intersex depending on the circumstance. But like, let's say you've got weird chromosomes like XXY or something. This can have all sorts of outcomes or none. You might never even know it for your whole life until you get like a blood test at the doctor or something, right? You've got your genes. There's all sorts of ways your genes can, do things outside of the expectations that we just kind of like talk about as if they're all that can happen. The fact is, genes are complicated. They do weird things. There are a lot of people out there that do not fall within the categories that we so rigidly want to define as that's a male, that's a female, and I know it, right? You got hormones. This is a common one. Hormones start playing a part before birth or conception, but it really starts to kick up during puberty. But if you are, this is one of the most common instances in which someone is intersex, is where they have some kind of hormonal irregularity that leads to outcomes physically that are kind of unusual. for instance, you might meet a guy, like they have a dick, balls, like they are a dude, right? But they have actual breasts. Not like they're overweight and they have like kind of looks like that. No, they have tits. Like they've got fucking tits, bro. That happens oftentimes, sometimes due to a hormone thing, right? You've got birth, like what can go weird due to a variety of factors around birth. And this, obviously, we know that during development, every fetus starts out as female, and due to chromosomes, hormones, etc., they're affected, the fetus is affected, and ends up developing, sometimes, developing male biological organs and developing into a male, right? Well, if things go weird at that point, or usually things can go wrong with hormones or chromosomes, and it can lead to weird outcomes discovered at birth. You might have heard the term hermaphrodite. This is a very old-fashioned, generally considered not appropriate term for intersex people that specifically have both sets of genitalia. That's right. There are people actually born with a penis, balls, and vagina, or a combo of that. Like they'll have like a penis and a vagina, or balls and a vagina, right? And it's like, holy shit, right? You know, even crazier, by the way, this is one of my favorite stories of an intersex person, is a man, lived his whole life as a man, dick and balls, never suspected that there could be anything weird about like their body or anything. Like they'd never assumed that they were abnormal in that sense. This guy went to the doctor, and he got an ultrasound done for, like, I think constipation. I think he was dealing with like constipation in his large intestine, and they did an ultrasound to see how things are going, and they were like, are you transgender? And he's like, no. And the doctor's like, you're gonna want to see this. He had a fucking uterus. Lived his whole life, never suspecting a damn thing. Born with nothing. Turns out this whole time, he had a uterus. Straight up. Yeah. Pretty fucking insane. Just had a dude had a uterus his whole life and just found that out. So basically my point is, this is like it's not even that uncommon. It's like uncommon enough that like most people don't know that this is a thing, right? Now, if you're wondering, we've got like an entire like axis here that expands horizontally, that shows us like when a complication happens, what kind of outcomes can we expect? So when it comes to chromosomes, you've got 46XX, 45X, 45X/46XY mosaism, 47XXY, 46XY, SRD5A2 gene mutation. Like, there's just like so much shit here. This is from the Scientific American. This is reputable shit. But like, the reality is that not even biological sex is as simple as you're born with a penis or a vagina, and that determines whether or not you're a man or a woman, and whether or not you have a penis or vagina is determined by your chromosomes, and they are always XY or XX, and that always has these outcomes, and it's as simple as that. Like, yeah. Zan explained this a few years ago if you go back into the backlog. Damn, that is an old-ass video, but you're right. I did a whole video talking about this. Yeah, I remember this video. This is a fun one. Look at my old Florida setup. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I think I'm better looking now. I think I'm definitely better looking now. I feel like age has done me good. Age has done me proud. Anyway, back to it. Just wanted to basically really emphasize here how much like the average person needs to learn, and how much the average person is just so far from understanding these issues, and that there's so much educating we have to do before we can start seeing positive results and positive change away from this era of transphobia we're entering. This is something you're going to notice a lot of, by the way, is like trans activists put on a platform having to like cuck themselves to standards that they shouldn't have to. So like she's arguing right now, like, yeah, obviously we shouldn't all be punished because one trans woman wanted to go to a woman's prison. Trans women should not be sent to men's prisons where we know statistically they will be raped constantly. That should not be what happens. It shouldn't. The fact that trans people arguing they don't want, like trans women arguing they don't want to go to a men's prison and be raped like every day is not like such a horrible thing that like they got too uppity with that one, right? But unfortunately, a lot of trans activists lately have been like really trying to appeal to the people who believe that kind of stuff and say, see, we're not all that bad. We're not all that bad. Because like we're at this point right now, we're on this issue. You can't even begin to convince people that trans women should be in women's prisons. Like that's so far. Look up V coding. Is that what this is called? V coding. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people face difficulties in prison, such as increased vulnerability to sexual assault, and other kinds of violence, and trouble accessing necessary medical care. While much of the available data on LGBTQ inmates comes from the United States, Amnesty International maintains records of known incidents internationally in which LGBTQ prisoners and those perceived to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender have suffered torture, ill treatment, and violence at the hands of fellow inmates as well as prison officials. One U.S.-based human rights organization, Just Detention International, describes LGBTQ inmates as among the most vulnerable in the prison population. So, yeah. Like, you're gonna, like, there's been a lot of this where prominent trans activists have been, like, walking back a lot of issues they shouldn't have to because, like, this desire to appeal to the average person. And it's this perception that like Trump's victory, like I think a lot of people on the left have taken Trump's victory as like much more of a cultural win for the right than it really is. Trump may have won the popular vote and everything, but it was only because there was so little voter participation among Democrats. It ties directly into the lack of desire to admit Biden was popular and good. Like Biden won so many votes, it's not even funny. He got the most votes any winning president has ever gotten, way more than Trump won with this time around. A lot of people on the Democrat side said they didn't vote for Kamala Harris because they thought she was undemocratically appointed. And they didn't like that there was no democratic process for her being nominated after Biden was elected the nominee, right? And so, like, a lot of lefties don't want to admit Biden was popular. He brought in a lot of votes. He brought in a lot of high voter engagement from Democrats. And then we ousted Biden, and we put in a candidate that brought in record low voter participation from Democrats. And we're all acting like this just means that progressive ideology is dying and everyone's moving right, when in reality it's the fact that, like, last minute we replaced a candidate that had a record of getting more votes than anyone else has ever gotten in a presidential election with someone who's never run in a general election before, 3 months ahead of time with no real prep time to be done and no electoral process to use as a legitimizing reason why you're the nominee. And here we are, right? Like, it ties all in together with, like, don't just see this victory by Trump as like a sign everyone is on Trump's side now. We need to see it as a sign that like the current Democrat leadership, or at least the Democrat leadership during the election with Kamala being the nominee, did not encourage Democrats to come out and vote. Dems didn't come out to vote for Kamala. And that is what the real problem was. This is not society moving right so hard. Like, we definitely have a lot of people we need to educate. Like, I don't think society has shifted right so much as we're recognizing now that society wasn't as left as we thought it was the last few years. We were not as far ahead on trans acceptance as we felt like we were in 2019 to 2021. Like, there's a lot more work to be done. This is, in fact, the civil rights issue of our age. Okay, so she is evil. You know, I need to see the comments. Although Ella Morgan concedes that there were some bad actors in the trans community taking advantage of the laxity in the law, it still seems rather ironic that she implied that, quote, they aren't really trans, yet who gets to decide? Certainly not her, when the notion of self-identification is so entrenched when it comes to trans and non-binary identities. So their argument is basically, you can't denounce bad actors in the trans movement, and you can't say they aren't even really trans, because you say being trans is how you identify. Checkmate, trans person. That is literally the top comment on this story. Cosmetic procedures don't change biological reality. You can get plastic surgery to look younger. It won't change biological age. The rest of us no longer care, thanks to years of bullying and appalling behavior towards any who disagree with their self-centered and nonsensical views. New Supreme Court ruling. There are 24 hours in a day. Ella, I feel nervous and scared. Woman across the entire country. I no longer feel nervous and scared about what bathroom rules might be waiting for me. Can you please explain which law has changed? Because no law has changed, no rights have changed. Maybe some self-proclaimed privileges have changed for people who are not happy to be just as everyone else, but they want to have more and keep wanting to have more. So yeah, it's very clear right now that, like, there is not a pushback against this ruling in the news media, like comment sections or anything. Like, Britain always was transphobic. Way more than I think a lot of you guys thought, like might have ever believed. We have a lot of work to do. And if you're trans, you need to keep yourself safe out there. We're in some pretty shaky times. But hey, listen. Once you know that trans people are real, and you know they're valid, you don't just forget that. No one's, like, flipping on the trans issue, unless they're going for, like, some kind of right-wing grift or whatever, I guess. But outside of that, no one is flipping on this issue. But those that are not pro-trans are getting louder and more tapped into the issue, talking about not being pro-trans than ever. We have to be out there countering their messaging and countering their misinformation. I think, honestly, over the next 4 years, I didn't do this as much during Biden's presidency because it wasn't as much of a constantly discussed topic. It wasn't really as necessary, it felt like, but I did this a lot when Trump was president the first time. Like, half my content for, like, 2 years until Biden won was on trans issues. Debunking transphobic content, like, going over news stuff around trans, like, laws and stuff. And because of that, I obviously have a very high preponderance of trans people in my community. But, like, I stopped doing that as much because, you know, things were pretty solid. Things were relatively stable over Biden's presidency. But right now, things have gotten so much more insane. I feel like it's time that we bring it back to Trump's original presidency, where I was making, like, 40% dedicated to debunking transphobia content. Like 40% of my content was dedicated to debunking transphobia. So maybe we got to bring it back to that, because this really is one of, if not the biggest political, social issue of our time. To quote Zan himself, today is trans rights, tomorrow is gay marriage. Exactly. Damn, that guy is so smart. Whoever said that is so fucking smart. In fact, the guy who said that, you should subscribe to his channel and leave a like on this video and a comment, because doing those things boosts the channel and the algorithm and forces YouTube to push my stuff out to more people and helps to grow the channel. It really, really does help and means so much when you guys do it. And of course, don't forget, if you want to see more from me on other platforms, you can follow my social medias, all linked down below in the description. And on top of that, you can if you want to support me directly, financially, help me keep the lights on and a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio, you can donate, subscribe, or gift a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buy some custom Xander Hall merch through the Streamlabs link down below in the description. Regardless of how you support me, though, thank you all so much for watching, as always, and have a good one.